Joins. Right. So COFMUG, March 2019. Today we are building an archiving solution. So this recently came about because we had a client who takes a lot of pictures. So they had a very giant file that was causing their drive to fill up because that file would be backed up 7 times. But they didn't want to do container data because separate from the backup because of the way their system was kind of tied together from the previous conversions. So they came to us asking for an archiving solution where they'd be able to export that, that inspection record with a number of photos attached to it and all the data from the related tables attached to it in a standalone offline format in a folder where they could look at that one project record, see all of the inspections related to that project, see all of the images related to each inspection, but then remove it out of their system. So what we're going to build tonight is a similar thing. So what I've done here is I've put together my big file, which actually I'll explain why this isn't all that big. So what I've done here is I've put together just a list of files, and it's just numbered 1 through 100. And each one of these files has the same 3 Bill Murray pictures attached to it. So there's actually a service online called FileMaker that generates sample images for you. And depending on what size you put in here, it pulls different images up. But I didn't change the file size, so it pulls up the same image each time for that size. So if I wanted different images, I could have randomized the 2 numbers in this URL, but I built this file in like 10 minutes. So, but Phil Murray, I like to find interesting APIs. So each one of these files has about 4.5 megabytes of data, comprised of 3 related pictures. So I just have a portal here of those 3 images. The relationship graph is very simple. I have my big file and images tied to a simple key. So what I want to do is I want to create an offline version of this file. So like if I'm looking at file number 1 right here and I archive this, I get an offline copy of file number 1 with the attached images on it so that I can delete it out of this system. So let's start building this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a clone of this file. So the clone of this file is going to become the offline user interface that we're going to use in this file. So I just do file, say the copy as clone no records, and I'm going to call this file UI.fmp12. So all that does is create an empty file. Okay, so just try to open up the wrong FileMaker Pro. So here is my empty file. If I go back here, I don't have any records in it.
So it just took the data out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So the next thing I'm going to have to do is export my 2 data tables. So I have 2 tables of data here. I have my files and I have my images. So if I go to each one of those layouts respectively and I just do file, export records here, and I choose FileMaker, I'm going to call this one file. And then I'm just going to dump that whole table out to that. And then I'm going to go to images and do the same thing. File, record, images. FileMaker. And dump out all of the fields. So now I have the UI file and both of my data files in there. So if you remember, 17 released a feature that allows you to dynamically connect to data sources using a global variable. So you can start to see where we're going to go with this. Oh, man. Need to change the default file on this. So in my UI file, what I want to do is I want to change this so that my data isn't coming from this file anymore. It's coming from those two other files that I just exported, the file and the images file. So in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to add two data sources under File, Manage, External Data Sources. So I'm going to add files, and that's going to be file, $, because it's a global variable. File path is variable down here. And then I'm going to add images as well. And then that's going to be images. And I'm going to make this singular because it is actually the file, because we're only going to export one file, but we're going to export all the images attached to that file. So I have file and images. On the scripts in here, what I want to do is under file options, script triggers, and actually I need to set this to be 17 because this will only work in 17. So on first window open, what I'm going to do is write myself a script to run when the file first opens that says connect data sources. And this script is going to set the variable of file. And I want to set this to be get file name. And I'm going to do underscore and file.fmp12. So this is going to be our file. And you'll see why I named it this way in just a minute. So we're going to do the same thing for our $$ images. We're going to do get file name and underscore and images.fmp12. Yep. Yeah, I forgot the second or forgot this quote, didn't I? You have to quote your strings. Yeah. All right. So that creates those two virtual paths to those two files that I have that will be named file name underscore file and images. The reason why I'm using get file name is because what I'm going to do with this UI file is I'm going to store it in a container in my live database so that when I export it with the file number as the file name. So I'm going to export UI.fmp12 as 1.fmp12 for file number 1. And then when this file opens, it will be called 1.fmp12, and it will create a file path that says 1_file and 1_images. So as long as I have the UI file, the export of the file data and the export of the images data all in the same folder, when I stick it somewhere, it'll open up and it'll all be connected fine, dynamically each time when I export it. All right. Dave, you've got a confused look on your face.
No.
Are you following along?
When you initially described the nature of the problem and started building these files, my head built my own version of how to fix this, and
yeah.
Now I'm having like a crossing thought path where periodically you drift close to mine, but then veer away.
Oh, yeah.
It's just my brain's like, oh, I didn't go that way. And so yeah, slightly confused.
That's a huge problem with learning FileMaker is there's never usually one single right answer. There's always like 3 or 4 ways to do the same thing. And people will get into arguments and like,
some people.
Yeah. At DEF CON, there will be screaming matches of drunk people in the bar at 11:30 at night just yelling at each other like,
curse of my ass.
Every every if calculation should be a case calculation. That's my favorite one. And it still haunts me to this day because now I write every if statement as a case statement. Terrible. All right. So all right. So we have the UI file. We have it so that it will connect when it opens up, which is good for us. So what we need to do now is go in here, and we actually need to change these two tables. Because remember, this now is not the table that's in this UI file. It's this data source file that we connected to. So it's going to ask me to find file. I'm going to find file there temporarily and hit OK. This is why I exported those files before, so that it could find these and connect them here so I could take a look at them. So I'm going to choose images. It won't find images because I didn't run anything to tell it where images is. So I'm just going to choose images out of here. And there we go. Primary key relates to file key. Still has the same. I suppose we can turn off cascade delete here in this UI file. But there we go. You can tell these are pointing to external file paths now because that table occurrence name is in italics. So if that's in italics, that means that data source is coming from a different file, not this one. All right. And you'll notice that since I did export all of those records, that all the records showed up in this UI file now. So in my main file, which is this is my live file, I'm going to go back into my database, and I'm going to create a new table called UI or something, or globals, or wherever, where I'm going to store this data. So it created all those fields for me. I'm just going to do UI file as a container field, create that. We're going to go to that layout it creates, create one record, and we're going to stick that UI file in there. So now I have UI in my database that I can export with my data to archive it. So let's start scripting. So this is the FileMaker coding language. It's either in here or it's in a calculation. So this is scripting. This is the calculation engine where you have the different separate functions that you can calculate. So this is my Phil Murray generator script. I'll leave this in here when I upload it. So this creates 100 records and 3 related images of the same image for each record. So I'm going to create a new script that is export archive. If you ever want me to zoom in on anything, just let me know. It's it looks very tiny on my screen. I suppose it looks a little bigger on the projector. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to export the current, well, first thing I guess is we want to get the file number of what we're exporting. So let's do that. So I'm going to set a variable of file for my file number. File key. No, it wasn't that. I'm on the wrong table. It's this file number. I'm also going to turn on error capture here. I'm also going to turn off the formatting bar, user abort. So this blocks the user from escaping during an incomplete process so that it makes sure it finishes this all out. And then I'm going to do a quick validation here that says if get layout table name is not equal to my big file, because we want to make sure that they're actually on a file when they export this. Exit script. Maybe even show them a dialog box that says, error, you can't do that here. Right, so there's comment this, make sure you are on the file layout to start this process. And then after you do all that prep work, now we can grab the file. It really doesn't matter what the order is in, but I like to order my scripts so they're at least a little bit logical in terms of their order. So we have the file. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to export records. We don't need a dialog. This is the other new feature in FileMaker 17 that we're using tonight. There's a function in here called create directories, and this means that if I export it to my desktop, I can set it to be part of a folder on the desktop, and if that folder doesn't exist, FileMaker will create it automatically for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a folder name that corresponds to the file number. So our folder is going to be folder 1. There's going to be a file inside of it that's 1.fmp12, that's our UI file. That's going to connect to 1_file, which is our file data, and 1_image is plural, which is our image data. So there's our file number. I'm going to create file path as file with a colon, and get desktop path. So this puts me on a file in my desktop. I'm going to add a folder for my file. And then I'm going to add, I think, do I need the slash there? Yes, I need the slash there. But I can't remember if it's a / or a backslash. I think it's a /. All right, so file, and then since this is I want 1_file.fmp12. So I'm going to put in the file number again, put in my _file.fmp12. So again, we'll walk through this step by step when it gets done so we can watch this. But this is going to do a file path on my desktop to a folder called 1 with a file called 1_file.fmp12. So this is our path to that file. And then when we export that, we're going to create directories. We're going to export a FileMaker file. We're going to send it to that file path. We're not going to open it or email it. And our export order is going to be just all of the fields from that file table. So that's essentially going to create the same file.fmp12 file with the name that we want. So we've done that. Now that we have the file, and I actually need to go back here and set this so that it doesn't export all of the files that I'm on, because if I'm in a found set, I only want to export the one. So I'm going to do, which trick should I use to do this? I guess I'll use this trick. This is the easy one. Show all records, omit record, show omitted only. All right. So what this does when you're on a found set of records, showing all records, or a queried set of records, this will show all the records. It will omit the record that you're currently on, so that that one is now not displayed in the list, and then it will invert that so that you're only looking at that file record that you were looking at. So that's a little trick to do that. There's a couple different ways to do that trick. There's, like go to record 1, or go to record, or omit multiple records from the next record and then go back and but they're all a little weird. You could also do a find, since we have the file ID here. That might actually be a better way to do it in our find mode. Set field. my big file, file number equals file, perform find. So you can do it this way as well if you want to.
Honestly, at this point, can't you just do that with a single step perform find? Now the variables work.
Yeah, but I always do my finds explicitly. Because when I die and somebody else has to come in and look at this and they see perform find and don't understand that that is also could potentially contain find requests in it, they'll be able to easily see that, oh, he's entering find mode, setting fields, performing find. So, yeah, so perform find is a dual use script step, not perform script. So if I do things this way, where I've highlighted this, this is the literal step-by-step of this. It's going into a query mode, setting a field on that query, and then hitting the enter key to perform that find. But FileMaker also has a shorthand version where in the perform find step, the final step, you can actually directly specify a request. So I could specify that my big file's file number equals file. So you could specify multiple criteria in here. Although I'm not sure if that, does that insert the variable if it's in a variable form? Right.
You can try it.
Nah.
You can combine that with operators.
You can. Right. So that's another thing where there are different ways of doing the same task.
I can say that's totally one of those things we can argue about later.
Yeah. And at least.
What's the advantage?
I'm not going to say that he's wrong. More recently, because I've been working so much with BDRs, I look at set field as an edit function. And so if I've got the ability to make a find not look like it's editing data, I will take that path. And because there's another way to do that puts it all in one step, can have 15 find criteria across multiple records, and that can all come in one step, which is all nicely encapsulated, then that would be the path that I would choose. He's not wrong. I used to do this. I actually had the exact same policy 10 years ago.
You see, 10 years ago, I used to put it all in perform find, and then I split it up because I was so sick of like picking up other people's code where it was embedded and not knowing what it does. Because if I open up this perform find and there's 20 different things and 3 are omit and 3 are find, and like also in find mode, if you do the enter find set field, you can also do things like duplicate records. So if you enter find mode, set 20 fields and then duplicate record and then change one thing, you can do that, which becomes a lot more difficult if you're using perform find.
And in that situation, I go the other way. There was nothing in this where I can say, like,
so
you're on the wrong
side. All of your if calculations should be case calculations. That's a case calculation.
So
inside joke.
What you guys are arguing about is that
it's using
function there has properties or attributes under it that can do a lot of stuff, but they're hidden.
Yeah.
Whereas here you see it in the actual script itself, the logic, instead of hiding.
Yeah. But there's not really any performance advantage because it takes the same amount of time to perform the find.
Actually, the script runs at about the same time because doing all the set fields doesn't have a substantive performance advantage. There are spots where if doing that find required 20 lines of code in a script that was otherwise 26 lines, it might not be clear where the find started and ended without really looking at all those lines. Whereas if you press it down to one line, it's just a single line that says perform find, it's got a little checkbox turned on the next criteria. That's it.
Well, then I really hope FileMaker considers my product idea of collapsible lines in FileMaker.
That would be fantastic, and it would be far less of an issue there. You need something to help offset it as like a block.
I mean, it took them 14 versions to get line numbers in the script, so.
Yeah.
FileMaker 25 will get the.
So what you're saying is reading this collapse just like.
So there's a lot of things in here like an if statement where if I was to click 5 right here, or a little arrow that was next to 5, I could collapse lines 5 through 8. But the same thing for if they would have to change the control structure around enter, find, and perform find. But if you had enter, find, and a whole bunch of find criteria, you could collapse it up. Almost every other coding platform that's like text-based coding allows you to do that, as long as you have you delimit things by tabbing in. So you do a loop and then you tab in. But what the code editor you're using recognizes the tab order and lets you collapse it all back up. FileMaker doesn't have the ability to tab your scripts. It's just all there at the top level. Yeah, and then it simulates it for you when you're inside of an if or if you're inside of a loop. But it's really, there's no difference between this, like, that's FileMaker is doing it, inserting the tab on those two steps. It's not something you can control. I've seen people do if one to tab stuff over so that it's, you know, so that it's faked.
Some languages like JavaScript will refer to that as a block. Oh, block.
So if you really want to tab some stuff over, you can do just if one, and that will always run, or true, because FileMaker has a keyword for true. And then anything you put in here will be tabbed in. So that lets you, so that I would use that if they let us even collapse only the if thing, ifs and loops.
I didn't mean to derail the discussion and just.
Oh, we still have an hour. We're done.
Just to reiterate, there's nothing wrong in anybody's book with what Mike was doing.
Yeah.
That was a pure stylistic choice.
And this is why I prefer presenting to user groups instead of like at DevCon. If this discussion happened at DevCon, I'd look at my watch and be like, and the session's over. Goodbye. Shorter presentations at DevCon. They used to be an hour and a half, which is what we run here, but they shortened it down to 60 minutes, including like Q&A and. Yeah, you're running through this.
I do like the way if you're writing scripts, I like even though there's more lines. It's more readable, someone else picking it up.
Everybody has their own styles. Like some people will go in and you'll see like a comment on every line, like get the file.
I'm in the hell of everything phase.
Are you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's because I'm kind of
Set the file path that. I mean, my goal.
more why than what.
Yeah.
But
That actually would be a fascinating session. We should do a whole thing on commenting code.
Yeah.
You'd never be able to get because some people are adamant about having like the same 30 lines of comments at the beginning of each script, even if that script is go to layout.
I'm not talking about a DevCon session. I'm talking about a COFMUG meeting. And just like brings their own stuff.
Yeah, I'm not trying to like.
We should get Matt, like we should get one of the FileMaker standards guys to come and give that presentation.
So what you're talking about is maintenance, how easy do you want your code to be maintained?
Human
if you want to
readable
write
format.
Fast code, you can run fast code. And it may work, but maintaining it then becomes a beta.
Yeah. So the particular curveball that I've more recently bumped into is I write a system metadata analysis tool for FileMaker that I sell to FileMaker developers. And one of the things that I see a lot of people doing is, hey, this field is being edited, and I don't know when and where it's being edited. And so they'll jump into FM Perception, my software, and say, show me all the set field lines.
Gotcha.
And the thing is, if you do it this way, half those set field lines aren't editing the field, or probably aren't editing the field. Whereas if you embed that search criteria in the perform script, it doesn't even appear as a use of set field. Because there's no way when it's embedded in the perform find for it to somehow accidentally edit the field. If something happens, and the way it's written, this is not a problem, but if something happens, that enter find mode goes away, all those set field things are actually editing records.
Yep.
And so the function of these steps is entirely dependent upon the step that's up here. Right. Whereas if you embed all of that, if you can, and you embed all of that in the perform script, then, or I'm sorry, the perform find, there's no way for that to mess up. The worst it'll do is not run the find.
So
but none of those find criteria can turn into edits.
it sounds like you need a diff feature that will figure out if that enter find mode went away.
Sure.
Get right on that, right?
Yeah. We'll talk about that further on. This is why it's a stylistic question.
Yeah.
Like, he's not wrong. I'm not wrong. You're not wrong. So if you're writing code, I find that in a lot of cases, consistency is better for readability than more code or less code. But if I start looking through your code, and every single time you run a find, you do it, enter find mode, set your stuff, perform find, and you get a little comment, a little bit of white space. Done. That's very easily readable.
Be a good preference for your program to read those out or not. To
Those set fields.
To check for enter find, perform find, or not. Because there's also, you can also use enter find mode as an open-ended find to go to a layout, enter find mode, set some stuff, and then leave it there in find mode for the person to adjust, and then hit enter for themselves. So the perform find is optional.
That actually popped up in the help desk again this week. People were like that exact thing. And honestly, the biggest problem is I can't be sure that a user will do the enter find, the set fields, and the perform find in one clean line with no conditionals around them. Like if you could wrap that enter find mode in an if. And now my analysis will have no idea whether it's actually enter find mode or not. Or you could have a script that does enter find mode and then runs a subscript that does the set fields, and then comes back and does the perform script. So after a script that just does set, you shouldn't. But if you get into a large, complex enough scripts, you might find yourself doing something silly like that. And if you did, I wouldn't be able to tell you whether those set finds are one way or the other.
That's why, I mean, it's good in one way, pros and cons, it's good in one way that you have multiple ways of doing something because people think different. But on the other extent, then the consistency of maintaining makes it much more difficult because if you're not consistent, it's going to be an error to maintain.
And there's, these answers might shift differently if you're talking about the code that you're writing, that you're planning on maintaining for yourself, and somebody else may have to somehow maintain it someday. Whereas when I'm writing the analysis tool, a lot of my customers are dealing with things where 15 other people wrote it over the last 20 years with different styles and in wildly inconsistent ways, and now they're trying to figure out how this system works and what's being touched.
And converting it.
That's a completely different use case from your use case. So, yeah, it's all fine.
Well, I developed the next step while we were talking
Okay.
here. So let me highlight and explain what I just.
I really didn't try to do it.
All right. So one thing I added up here is grabbing the primary key of our file, and you'll see why in a minute why we need the primary key of our file. So now that we've exported our file data, we need to go export our images data. So what do you do if there is no related data to that file, and you need to export something because that file needs to be there, otherwise when it opens, yeah. So essentially what we need to do is create a placeholder. So I'm just doing a simple if here that counts the primary key of my images, And if that's 0, if there aren't any images related to this file, I'm going to go to the images layout, create a new record, and set that file key to be that ID primary key that we got before. And that's going to give us one record, empty record that we can export. Since this is going to be deleted anyways after we export our archive, there's no real harm in doing one blank empty record there. Well, unless they have something that's like invoicing, charging by the image or something. You know, you could host an empty file with 0 records and then export that file with 0 records and rename it when you export it too. That's the other alternative to this. This just happens to be ridiculously easier. So for the sake of this presentation. There's an else in here, and if it's an else, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the related records of the file using the go to related records script step. So we're going to go to the related images, using the images, and we're only going to match the current record here. And we don't need animation. Actually, all of this should be done with a freeze window as well. Freeze window just freezes the window while it does all the stuff in the background for you. All right, so there's the go to related record. So now, yep.
What's the freeze window do? It gives time.
It stops the window from redrawing so that the user only sees where they started from. So as it goes to these different layouts and exports files and stuff, the user doesn't see that. The user will see the dialogues of exporting, but they will be on the first layout that they were on.
Otherwise, they'd see a lot of things flash to the screen. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. So we're on our found set of images now, so we can do the same thing we were doing up here with the file path. And we don't have to do this show, omit, show thing because we already went to the related record, so we only need the file path here. Just for kicks, I'm going to call this image path. Everything else is still the same, but instead of file, this one is renamed images, _images. So export directories, export image path, and for the order that we're doing images, and we're just moving all of these over. Okay.
Now, is this image path and file path, is this just on your machine? You run into problems if this is running on another server between two machines?
Well, if I was exporting the data on the server, I would probably use a server compatible path. Yeah, you can't use the desktop path on the server.
This is assuming it's...
Yeah, this whole action is a manual archive. There is going to be a user of this system going through and saying, I want to archive this data because you could turn this into an automated process, but the purpose of this demonstration is for a manual one because the client that we implemented this for does this manually. They go into their file list. There's actually a checkbox they mark that says this one's ready for archive. Somebody else comes through, archives that data, and then removes it. And it actually leaves, in their case, it leaves the file record in there, and it gives them a big red message on the screen that says, this has been archived. Because all of the portals are now empty because that data has been deleted. So they see a message over their portals that says, this has been archived, so that they know somebody went in, downloaded that, and then they have to hit 2 separate buttons. So they have to download the data. That marks a flag that says it's been downloaded. And then they get the option to delete the data once it's been downloaded. So it's a multi-step process to get there, but it's completely manual. It has to be eyes on by their administrative team. It's also controlled with user privileges and stuff. So the one we built is much more robust than this, but this is kind of laying the framework if you want to.
So what this does to it is it keeps it from being unmanageable size-wise?
Yeah, so each one of their projects has up to 2 gigabytes worth of image files in that project. So as their file size has grown to 70 gigabytes of file size, they've had to think about what data they want to keep in their files. So they want to keep the project record in there and just say, like, these are all my projects, but the images are what they want to archive. So in order to export all those images, but still do it in a format that's related to, that they can open up a file and look at those images, we essentially mirrored this file. So essentially what we're doing is creating a clone of the entire system for them, but with only one record in it, or one chain of records in it. Can you get the door for a second, please?
Yeah. Why couldn't you use an external container?
Like I noted at the beginning of the meeting, they don't want to do that. They have a number of different issues, but they don't use external container.
I guess I'd say size was an issue.
Well, that still becomes an issue of size because their FileMaker server is limited in size versus what their SAN is. So, like, they have a file server that has a ton of storage space that they're dropping these archives into. That's not their FileMaker server, and we can't use that file server as a backup folder. The backup folder for FileMaker has to be attached to the server. So. Their server is in AWS, their file server is local on their network. So there's a number of challenges, but like I said, this is to give you the basic building blocks so you can build something like this. All right, so we've now exported our file and our image path, so the only thing we have to do is the UI file. So we're going to go to that layout, that UI layout. We're going to export field contents of our UI file. So we're going to export our UI file contents as UI path. So as you guessed, I'm going to need a UI path. So I'll set a variable of UI path with our file get desktop path and file and slash and file again for our folder name, and finally, or actually, sorry, file name, and since this is the file itself, we're renaming it as 1.fmp12. So it's just the file name plus .fmp12. Export the field contents, return. Go to layout, original layout, show custom dialog, archive complete, saved on your desktop. That is it. But let's actually drop this on our layout and do some stuff with it now. So we've got our UI file, we've got these files. I am going to throw this stuff on the desktop away because we no longer need it. We've set up everything that we need. So I'm going to go to our detailed view, and I'm going to pop a button on here that's going to run this script. And let's give it the little download icon. Download, archive. I set this to perform a script to export our archive. Bump up that. There we go. All right, so now we have a button that will perform this download archive. And I can show you too, if I drop this on my images layout, say I wanted this here, it's going to give me my error message that I was checking for to make sure I was on the right layout. You can't do that here. So I'll go back to, I need to go into find mode, but I'll go back to the detail view here. So this is file number 1. Let's use our script debugger. So tools, script debugger. We're going to walk through the script and just review everything that we just did. So I'm going to press download archive. I wish there was a way to zoom in the script debugger. I really do. So I'm going to step into this script, set error capture on, allow user abort off, freeze the window. The window won't freeze because we're stepping through the debugger, so it'll redraw, but you'll see when we run this without the debugger. So we're on the right place, so it skips over that. We're getting the file and the ID. If I open up my data viewer, you can see that my ID and my file is there, file number 1. Now we're setting our file path. If I look at my file path, it is Mac hard drive, users Beargie desktop 1, and then 1_file.fmp12. So that all looks good. There's the show all records. So that'll show all 101 records there. Then it will omit the record I'm on. You can see that found set just went from 1 being omitted. And then I'm going to show omitted only. So now I'm on the found set of just the 1 record, 1 out of 100 found. So now this is going to create that file. So if I look on my desktop now, you can see it right here. There's a folder here now called 1. And if I open that up, there is 1 file.fmp12. Which, if I open that file, is just going to be this file's data in there. So back in FileMaker, we're stepping through. It's counting images, but I have images, so it's going to go to those related images. And you'll see that when I did that, it's on a found set of 3 out of 300 images that I have now. So I'm on the correct found set already of what I need to export. So now I'm going to set my image path. I forgot I can't tab between that. So my image path is the same thing. Users Beargie desktop 1, 1_images.fmp12. Export these records. So now my folder 1 should contain 1 file and 1 images, which it does. So now go to layout. We're going to our last layout. We're setting our UI path. UI path is set to just 1.fmp12. And remember, that file, when it opens up, is going to get its own file name, which is 1, and it's going to set its path to the file data as 1_file, and then it's going to set the path to the image data as 1_images. So all this is coupled together. So let's do that. It exports that container, verify that this folder has 1.fmp12, which it does. So those 3 files have now been exported into their own folder.
Can we see what's in there?
Yeah, when we're done debugging our script. But there's nothing left to do. It's go to the original layout that we were on and saved on your desktop, archive complete. So that's it. So let's show you what that looks like if I do file number. I'm going to show all files again. The only thing this doesn't do is restore your found set, which is a little annoying, but if you really wanted to, you could, actually a cool way to do it is to save a snapshot link and then open up the snapshot link so it takes you back in. That's cheating. It's cheating. So I am on number 66, so let's download archive 66. See how fast that went. Well, I'm working on a local file, but still. Now in the 66 folder, you see 66 66 file and 66 images. So I'm actually going to open up file 66. It's going to tell me that FileMaker 16 won't run in Mojave anymore. Oh no, file could not be opened, not found. Not found. Did I save that script in the UI? All right, so there's file. Well, it looks like images worked. So let's debug our UI file again. So I deleted it prematurely, but it's easy enough. Export it to the desktop. Open up the UI file. Just drag it into the trash can now. I'm done with U16. Huh?
You keep 16 for a reason?
Well, I mean, before I updated my hard drive, it worked because I wasn't on Mojave yet. So it was a non-issue. All right. So let's see what went wrong in my UI file. Connect data sources. File, get file name, $$ file, get file name, underscore, file.fmp12. That should be right.
If file name doesn't include the extension.
No, because it worked on the images, remember? It only asked me to look for file. So then I would check under external data sources. This path is file. It's probably asking me because it's probably because it opens up on the file layout before the script runs, which is super annoying, but not entirely without. So what I need to do to my UI file, actually, UI images. I need to create a new scratch table in this one. I created UI in our live file, but I'm just going to create a temp table here, nothing attached to it. And I'm going to go to that layout. And when I close this file, it will remember that I was on that layout, but also under file options, I'm going to tell it to switch to that temp layout. And then ideally, I mean, I'll put a message that just says loading on this screen. But ideally, it'll happen so fast that you'll never see this screen when it opens up.
And the auto script needs to do a go layout, so it switches away from that.
Oh, so it goes back. And I suppose I could put it in here as well. That's a redundant script step. You're not going to yell at me for that?
No.
What's the point?
Making sure that when your script runs, it sets all the things that need to be set, so that if he, at some point, changed some other starting point or closed something wrong or whatever,
So
there's a chance that it will catch the issue. If your script needs to be someplace to run, you should start your script with making sure that you're on that screen.
Okay, gotcha.
Either with a conditional that checks to see what layout you're on, or with a go to layout that actually puts you there.
So what I'm also,
Context. It's executed.
so I'm also going to do a go to layout temp as the last window close on here. So when the window closes, it goes back to that temp view rather than staying on that other view. So that gives me some more protections. So that's our UI file. So I'll wipe out what's in here. I will redrag our UI file into here. I will redrag all of this stuff into the trash can. And now we will try that again. So we're still on order 66. Order 66. So now let's open up 66.fmp12 and see.
Just right click on it, real quick. Just right click on it. I wasn't going to do that. I was going to do the get info. And you can override the mapping.
Yeah.
Or right there, always open with.
All right. No error message opens up, and there is our standalone copy of the file. So as we can see from this folder's contents, we have our 4.2 megabytes of data that we can now delete out of our database. So imagine this, except it's 400 megabytes or 2 gigabytes worth of image data. So now that they've done that, they can look at this file and say, okay, 66 has been archived, what about the images? So that's really all there is to it. You can build this much more complex, much more robust, but this is a good starting point in terms of generating this file. So again, this is FileMaker 17 plus the 2 features that we used that came out in FileMaker 17 were the creation of directories. So if you were trying to do this prior to FileMaker 17, you would have to create your directories using a plugin like Base Elements or something like that. Or just save the files to the desktop and count that the user was going to drag those files somewhere else. The other feature we used is setting the dynamic data source as a variable for the external data sources. And that lets us send that table data out to their separate files of data. The other way that there's a couple different ways that I've seen people tackle this same problem. Another way is to keep an empty copy of the file hosted, push the data into that file, download that hosted file using one of the using a system script or something that tells FileMaker Server to close the copy file, download or copy it to a folder somewhere else, and then that's essentially if you wanted to make a clone of this file with only those records. It's much more complicated to do. It has to be done on the FileMaker Server side. So if you're already doing it manually with somebody that's using FileMaker Pro, there's no reason not to just do it this way. It's much easier to set up. I guess if you only wanted one file instead of a folder of files, maybe that. Or if you don't have FileMaker 17 and you have to do it the old clone way, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, push the data to the empty hosted file, close that file, copy the closed file, reopen the hosted file, clear the data out of that.
There was Roy Gordon's trick. Remember his iOS demo? He was using it to do a multi-table export for data transfer so that you could attach that to an email, get it to the other side, and have the data be able to be pulled in. But dumping it out basically worked. And what he had was a clone of the original file stored in the file, kind of the same way you did.
Yeah.
But when that was exported and opened, it went and grabbed everything from the current found sets of matching tables. So it imported out of the live file on opening. So you establish your found sets, export the UI file, open the UI file, and then pull all the data out.
Yeah.
And then you close that UI file, and it's got your stuff. Done.
Yep. That's an interesting way to do it.
It kept it all in. I'm curious about, there's things that I don't know about. For example, if you do an export to FileMaker with all the fields, do all of the field IDs remain the same as they were in the source file?
So the question I'd ask you next.
I have to.
No, that's a one you asked Clay Mackle.
Because the thing is, if the IDs aren't the same, then I'd be concerned when you're exporting this thing, like exporting the files.
That question came up when they came out with when they came out with the data transfer utility. And I believe the answer wasn't that the file or the field IDs were the same, but just that FileMaker was smart enough to realize that the field name was the same, so it connects the dots for you.
And I know, I can confirm that that's the way that works on the data migration utility.
Then I'm pretty sure it's the same way for this because it uses the same underlying technology of identifying. They introduced that, and we got it's like this being able to point to a file with a global variable is almost a side effect of the data migration utility prep work.
And the other one on there was if you add a field, you have to update your export.
Well, you know that I got bounce like as.
Yes. Oh. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully she gets better.
Yes.
We got your card the other day.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll catch you.
See you guys next week.
So your UI file will not be expecting that new field that you added to the live database.
Right.
So if you add a new field to this, if I add a new field here right now, it'll still work. Because the UI file that I'm storing that connects to the files I export doesn't have that new field in it yet.
Right, but if you actually want to export that field and have it archived, you actually have to add it to the export, even if you don't add it to the other UI files UI.
You do.
Like you have to edit the script every time. If you do Roy Gordon's trick, when you add the field, all you have to do is make sure to make a new UI file.
Yeah.
Because then it will also have the field, and you do the import from two matching tables with matching fields turned on, it will automatically link those back up. So it's a question of what you want to edit when you do the file thing. That's a neat trick. I hadn't seen it done with the variable file references.
That is a neat trick. That actually might be better than this way, but this way shows off the features of FileMaker.
That was a great script walkthrough. I mean,
yeah.
I
also miss Roy. He hasn't been here in like 3 years.
I'll also give you points for walking through the script through the debugger the first time. Because anytime I'm playing with file paths, I'm going to run it first to see if everything exports. Then I'll step through and make sure it's good. Because otherwise, I know I missed one of those slashes somewhere, and the file's going to end up writing right.
Yeah.
Like that happens every time. So.
All right. Other questions? You were building yours along with us, right? Let's see. All right. Well, that is it for the demonstration. So I'm going to cut off the recording here, and I'll leave the Zoom meeting open so people can listen in if they want to hear us banter for the rest of this time. So thank you, everybody.
Can I get a